Veuillez vous asseoir.
Please take your seats.
La séance est reprise.
The session is resumed. I give the floor to the clerk to give us the order of our work this afternoon. You have the floor, sir. Thank you. Now we'll have the presentation and debate, discussions and adoption of the resolutions and recommendations of the second session of the fourth legislature. I give the floor to Honorable Elmi DJIBRIL to read out the draft recommendations and resolutions.
Micro.
Bon après-midi, Monsieur le Président.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, Vice Presidents. I have the honor and the immense pleasure to read out the resolutions and recommendations from the Fourth Parliament, the Second Ordinary Session of the Pan-African Parliament that was held here from the 2nd to the 13th of May 2016. I'll start with the draft resolutions and I will not be reading all the text, but only the titles, and then straight to the recommendations, since you have all the documents before you. With your permission, thank you. Draft resolution for the holding of the third ordinary session of the Fourth Parliament of the Pan-African Parliament in a member state. The Pan-African Parliament decides to hold its session in another member states than the African. No observation, no amendment adopted. Draft resolution on the status of former presidents and vice presidents of the Pan-African Parliament. The Pan-African Parliament decides first to grant the following titles and benefits to former members of the Bureau of the Pan-African Parliament. 1.1 Goodwill ambassadors of the Pan-African Parliament to former presidents of the Pan-African Parliament. 1.2 Honorary vice presidents of the Pan-African to former vice presidents of the Pan-African Parliament. 2. These titles will accord them the right to a vehicle and per diem when they are on mission on behalf of the Pan-African Parliament. Done in Madrid on the 12th of May. Adopted. Resolution number 3, draft resolution for the establishment of focal points relating to women within the structures of the Pan-African Parliament. The Pan-African Parliament decides to establish within PAP focal points responsible for issues relating to women within all the structures of PAP, that is the Bureau, caucus, committees, and Secretariat. 2. Implement gender mainstreaming in all policies and in the daily functioning of the Parliament. 3. Functions of the focal points are encourage a more favorable and sensitive attitude in matters relating to women, support procedures which will make it possible to take into account issues relating to women in the exercise of their functions, increase awareness of gender issues, and advocate for the reduction of gender gaps. Regularly assess issues relating to gender in order to strengthen the coordination of actions within and within and outside PAP, as well as to provide technical support and advice, and to provide equal skills, equal opportunities. To draft a detailed report on the situation of women within the organs of PAP at each statutory meeting of the PAP Parliamentarian Women's Caucus. No observation. Adopted. We haven't received the documents, Mr. President. We do not have the documents, Mr. President. Documents in Arabic.
Résolutions en arabe sont prêtes. C'est les recommandations qui retardent.
Mais là, c'est
Ni en français.
Non, non, c'est le président.
Oui.
C'est les résolutions.
Well, we do have the recommendations, Mr. President, in Arabic, but we don't have the resolutions yet.
Just one moment. On va vérifier. Nous étions à la troisième.
We were on Resolution 4.
Chers collègues, comme il y a une...
Dear colleagues, since we have simultaneous interpretation, can we move forward? Can we move on? Madam Vice President, yes, you have the floor. Draft resolution on the establishment of an NEPAD agency focal point for the Pan-African Parliament. The Pan-African Parliament resolves that a NEPAD focal point is established within the Pan-African Parliament. 2. The focal point shall be designated by the Bureau of the Pan-African Parliament from amongst the members of the Permanent Committee on Cooperation, International Relations and Conflict Resolution, based on technical knowledge and experience on the mandate and operations of the NEPAD agency. 3. The focal point shall have the mandate to ensure linkages, coordination and synergies between PAP committees dealing with NEPAD. B. Serve as a political and strategic focal point on NEPAD-related issues and the Pan-African Parliament. C. Identify and propose new cooperation and collaboration areas for PAP-NEPAD partnership. D. Exercise all other functions as are incidental or auxiliary to the discharge of its mandate, as NEPAD is the socio-economic development blueprint for the AU to implement its objectives. 4. The NEPAD focal point shall report to the Bureau of the Pan-African Parliament, adopted in Midrand on the 12th of May 2016. No observation. Adopted.
Projet de résolution sur le sommet des parlements.
Draft resolution on climate change. The Pan-African Parliament resolves to develop a concrete work plan for the annual participation of the Committee on Rural Economy, Agriculture, Environment and Natural Resources and relevant committees in future conferences of the parties on climate change, COP. 2. Mobilize adequate financial resources to secure the participation in global annual climate change meetings. 3. Establish an ad hoc committee to coordinate and organize the participation of PAP and the Committee on Agriculture in future COPs. 4. Coordinate with the relevant organs of the African Union to harmonize the participation of AU organs in the future COPs. Adopted in Madrid on the 12th.
Draft resolutions on non-statutory meetings of permanent committees of the Pan-African Parliament. The Pan-African Parliament decides to encourage committees to have their non-statutory meetings outside of the Pan-African Parliament, develop appropriate policies and strategies to enhance the capacity of the permanent committees in generating and disseminating knowledge and information. Thirdly, support the organization of regular meetings for the permanent committees with their counterpart departments of the AUC. Midrand, 12th of May, 2016. Adopted. A draft resolution on electronic governance in Africa. The Pan-African Parliament decides to lobby African states to sign and ratify the AU Convention on Cyber Security and the Protection of Personal Data. 2. Sensitize national parliaments on the adoption of laws on cyber security and on the creation at national, regional and continental level on emergency computer science intervention team and or security and intervention teams for computer science incidents. 3. Urge national and regional parliaments to implement a real parliamentary communication policy with a view to strengthening access by citizens to all governmental institutions, including the parliament on the one hand, and to promote transparency, efficiency, and acceptability of state institutions on the other. Midrand, 12th of May, 2016. Adopted.
Yes, recommendation, Madame, you have the floor.
Ok, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. Let me go to different recommendations from the 4th legislature, second session from 3rd to 13th of May. Recommendations for the adoption of the budget of the African Union for the financial year 2017 as submitted for its consideration. The Pan-African Parliament recommends that the adoption of the budget considered done in Midrand on 12th of May. Adopted. Second recommendation. Recommendation on the fact-finding mission of the Pan-African Parliament in the Republic of Burundi from 23rd to 27th of November 2015. The Pan-African Parliament recommends that, firstly, the international community, particularly the United Nations and the African Union, take all necessary measures to ensure a speedy resolution of the conflict in Burundi, particularly by encouraging and supporting dialogue between all stakeholders. Secondly, the African Union and the United Nations support the key national Burundian institutions set up to address the consequences of the conflicts, particularly the National Commission or Inter-Burundian Dialogue and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the Burundi justice system. Thirdly, the African Union and the United Nations and the international community to work together under the chairmanship of the African Union to negotiate an acceptable agreement between the government of Burundi and all the opposition political parties and other stakeholders both in and outside Burundi. The African Union Commission expedite the finalization of the Memorandum of Understanding with the Burundi government and determine the areas of support for the African Union and the Pan-African Parliament. 5. The government of Burundi to ensure inclusive national dialogue, impunity of gross human rights violations, and a safe return for the internal displaced persons and refugees. 6, the African Union play a more proactive role in conflict prevention and resolution in upcoming elections in African states, adopted in Midrain on 12th of May 2016. Draft resolution on the creation of a parliamentary assembly of the United Nations, APUNUC. The Pan-African Parliament recommends of appealing to member states of the African Union so that it supports the creation of a UNPA and to take necessary steps to advance this goal at the UN by triggering and initializing a preparatory intergovernmental process for the purpose of establishing a UNPA. Recommends that the African Union develops and advance a common African position on the matter. Requests the President of the Pan-African Parliament to take all necessary measures to submit and defend this recommendation to the African Union policy organs and to call for its full support by the member states of the African Union and the chairperson of the African Union Commission. Adopted at Midrain on the 12th of May. No comments, no observations. It is thus recommended. Draft recommendations on electronic governance in Africa. The Pan-African Parliament recommends that 1. The African Union encourages and supports the bilateral and unilateral cooperation for the apprenticeship and the exchange of practical experiences in the field of e-governance in order to help countries that are lagging behind to develop analog tools for an electronic and modern administration. 2. The African Union relaunches the project on the creation of an African virtual university in light of the fact that many African countries have to date developed and put in place infrastructure on, I think there is a mistake in the French version, and put in place infrastructure on ICT. The African Union requests African governments to assist local enterprises to migrate to digital economy. 4. The African Union calls on governments to facilitate and encourage the promotion of African products to the creation of online markets of made-in-Africa products. 5. National parliaments be endowed with a digital portal for an efficient parliamentary communication and a better visibility of their parliamentary activities by the end of 2016. Midrain, 12th of May. Paragraph 2, the Secretariat is requested to amend the paragraph and make the necessary corrections in French. Thank you. No observations, no comments recommended. Draft recommendations on strengthening women's rights to land access, a parliamentarian response to close the gender gap for economic development through agriculture. The Pan-African Parliament recommends to mobilize national parliaments, civil society organizations, women's organizations, legislators, ministers of women's affairs and parliamentary committees to promote the ratification, domestication and effective implementation of the Maputo Protocol and other African Union legal instruments on women empowerment in order to secure women's rights to land. 2. Raise awareness on the domestication of the Maputo Protocol in member states among national parliamentarians, ministers in charge of the Maputo Protocol, the responsible parliamentary committee, as well as the Women Caucus in the national parliaments to harmonize the law of succession in line with the Maputo Protocol. 3. Encourage member states to eliminate onerous clauses in their national laws, impeding on the effective realization of the rights guaranteed under the Maputo Protocol, including the rights to access to education, to health and to water, especially for rural women and girls. 4, develop a framework guiding the interactions between PAP and national parliaments in monitoring progress on the ratification, domestication, and implementation of the AU instruments advancing women's access to and control over land. 5, create a subcommittee on gender equality and agriculture to control and evaluate progress made concerning 30% of the land reserved for women as agreed by member states. Midrand, 12th of May 2016. No comments, no observations. It is thus recommended. I give the floor to Mrs. Bernadette Lahaye so that she can present a resolution to us. Thank you. You have the floor.
Point of order, Mr. President.
Yes, point of order.
The copy of the resolutions has not yet been distributed. We don't have the English copy here. I don't have the English copy, and I've asked it for several times. Thank you, Mr. President.
Excuse me, we are continuing. You have the copy. Yes, Honorable Bernadette.
Draft resolution on Western Sahara. I'm reading this draft resolution in English because what is it?
Please, cette résolution nous a été transmise ce matin par l'honorable.
This resolution was sent to us this morning, and we are submitting it to you. The proposal was made this morning, and the resolutions were formulated and signed. If it is not agreeable to you, we will do it another time. You have the floor, Madam Bernadette Lahaye.
Yes, Madam, go.
Draft resolution on Western Sahara. The Pan-African Parliament condemns the Moroccan persistent occupation in Western Sahara, condemns the Moroccan expulsion of 84 staff from the civilian component of UN mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, that is MINUSU, express its support to the African Union and its special envoy for Western Sahara, Mr. Joachim Chissano, urgently calls the Security Council to fulfill the mandate of MINUSU and to extend it to monitor human rights violations committed by the Moroccan occupation in Western Sahara, demands the unconditional release of the Sahrawi political prisoners in Morocco prisons, and calls upon Morocco to stop the exploitation of Western Sahara natural resources. I thank you.
Pas d'observation.
No observations, no comments. The resolution is adopted. Thank you. Thank you very much, dear colleagues.
Stop. Mesdames et messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen, Vice Presidents, ladies and gentlemen, chairpersons of the permanent committees, ladies and gentlemen, chairpersons of the regional caucuses, Madam Chairperson of the Women's Caucus, the President of the Youth Caucus, honorable parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, after 2 weeks of hard work, we are gathered here to close the second ordinary session of the fourth legislature of the Pan-African Parliament. However, we will not part ways before I mention two very pleasant duties. The first one is to congratulate on behalf of the Bureau and on my own behalf those who during this session have been elected to various positions. My congratulations first go to Her Excellency Mrs. Safia Elmi DJIBRIL, brilliantly elected second Vice President of the Pan-African Parliament representing East Africa. Madam Vice President, it is with great pleasure that we are welcoming you to the Bureau, and we hope to be able to count on your wisdom to help our Bureau attain its objectives. My congratulations then go to all those who have been voted in permanent committees or caucuses or rather for positions. The trust bestowed in them by their peers is a sign of the esteem of their colleagues. And may they know that they deserve our support. The second duty that I have is to express on behalf of the Bureau and on my own behalf our gratitude to those who, through many different contributions, allowed this ordinary session to be a success. Indeed, whether it be special guests at the session, the most illustrious of whom were His Excellency Mr. Bai Koroma, represented by his Vice President Mr. Victor Boukrai-Fo, and His Excellency Mr. Joachim Chissano, former President of Mozambique and Special Envoy of the African Union to Western Sahara, or even presidents of assemblies of senates, ministers who have gratified us with messages of solidarity. Their presence amongst us has given meaning to the struggle that is the one of the Pan-African Parliament. One Africa, one voice. We have been very grateful for their encouragements, and we thank them. The South African government that has done everything possible to make the session a success, and their efforts were really appreciated. And what do we have to say about the African Union that gratified us with its expertise and necessary funds to the organization of the session, despite a financial situation that is particularly difficult? We are therefore especially grateful to the African Union. To the whole staff of administration and management of the Pan-African Parliament, whether permanent staff or part-time staff, we really would like to thank them. We have seen them sacrifice weekends before and during the session, arrive at the Pan-African Parliament at the crack of dawn, and leave at night so that the session becomes a success. Thanks to the devotion of Pan-African parliamentarians, the program was done in the time that was given. The eyes were looking at objectives to attain, and they accepted changes, last-minute changes imposed by those whose timetables that are very busy would make the trip to the Pan-African Parliament in Midrand. Many issues were raised. Debates were very lively at certain moments, and they witnessed the interest that is shown by parliamentarians towards the problems that we have to face in Africa. Concerning the Pan-African Parliament, we are very grateful to those colleagues who, by the issues raised, have allowed us to find solutions to these many issues and to enlighten us on their concerns. Even sometimes to communicate very simply on points that were important to them. The next report of activities will be, I can assure you, a response to many more questions than those raised during the session, particularly those relative to the follow-up reserved to resolutions that you have voted on, and also about the financial situation of your parliament, and to audit reports. To err is human. You know that as well as I do, dear colleagues. The parliamentarians are an essential link to the functioning of the Pan-African Parliament, and it is with you, dear colleagues, that we have to realize the ambitions of the Pan-African Parliament. This is why your observations and comments will always be welcome when they are constructive and founded on real facts. Please do not hesitate to ask information, but do it to people who have the right information. Please be wary of rumors. Dear colleagues, at the time where we are going to part ways, I am going to miss you and you are going to miss me. We will always want to be together with everything that involves as a diversity of opinions and behaviors. You will need to see me angry just as I want to hear you. Our parliament is alive, and that vitality is translated by the effervescence that has been shown during our session that is ending. Speaking about the vitality of our parliament, I would like to invite you to forget the subjects that can divide you. Amongst those, elections. Elections are the expression of democratic maturity. We must express our opinion without passion. But the last election within the caucus nearly divided us for nothing. Our rules of procedure is mute as far as this election is concerned, and it is also mute as far as the candidates for the youth caucus is concerned. As an ad hoc committee, the election of its bureau must happen during its meeting. But considering what happened before, I forwarded this question to the Permanent Committee on Rules to obtain the good decision, the right decision, and the right procedure on the matter. This is why we have postponed this election until the next ordinary session of October 2016. Let's avoid internal divisions, internal rumors, and let's also avoid incompetence. Let us leave politics to politicians and administration to administrators. I wish that this type of incident will never disturb the serenity of our proceedings in future. The conclusion of our proceedings is satisfactory if we look at the quality of the different subjects raised. We must, as the motto of the Pan-African Parliament, be one Africa, one voice, give the image of a united team. The performance will happen naturally. Let us work together intelligently so that this convergence and the people of Africa will produce the best for the continent. Dear colleagues, you will be traveling in the next few hours. I wish all of you good trip, but do not forget that in your respective countries you are extraordinary plenipotentiary ambassadors of the Pan-African Parliament, whose mission is in 2016 the ratification of the Malabo Protocol. In compliance with the provisions of Rule 34 of our Rule of Procedure, I have received the letter of invitation from the Arab Republic of Egypt, in which it says that it will welcome our session of October 2016. This session has really witnessed an average participation of 120 members at all plenaries. Dear colleagues, this session has welcomed approximately 120 members, and we wish for this participation to increase. It is with this information that I declare closed the proceedings of the second ordinary session of the fourth legislature of the Pan-African Parliament, open in Midrand in South Africa on the 3rd of May 2016. One Africa, one voice. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Veuillez vous lever pour l'exécution de l'hymne de l'Union.
Please stand up for the anthem of the African Union. Thank you.
Veuillez vous asseoir.
Do sit down.
Voir l'ensemble des recommandations et des
Recommendations and resolutions of our session are put to the vote, adopted, and the session is adjourned.